The obstetrician told me to call a lawyer before he told me the baby's gender. That sentence doesn't leave your head once you've heard it. It echoes, like metal hitting metal in a motor pool, long after the sound should have died. We were in a room painted the color of toothpaste at Cypress Crest Women's Health in North San Antonio. The air smelled like rubbing alcohol and printer toner. My wife, Marina, was lying back on the paper-covered table, belly slick with gel, watching the gray and white storm on the monitor with the smile of someone who'd finally gotten what she wanted. I'm 37, gunnery sergeant, 8 months in Farah Province, 2 weeks back in Texas. Training teaches you to breathe evenly when an engine quits or a convoy takes fire. It teaches you not to move until you've read the terrain. So when Dr. Calvin Ortega looked at the screen and then at me like he'd seen a mine someone painted the wrong color, I didn't flinch. I counted 2 breaths, then said, "Problem?" "The baby looks healthy," he answered, too quickly. "Strong heart. Good movement." His voice had that tight, careful shape doctors use when they're selecting words like they might explode. Then he lowered the transducer, swallowed hard, and added, so softly only I heard. "But the measurements placed development at roughly week 31-32. Silence does a trick in rooms like that. It expands until it's the only thing with weight. Marina blinked up at him, still smiling, the way you do when you're not sure if the punchline is supposed to be funny. She'd been doing that a lot since I got home, watching my face like she was trying to guess which version of me she'd get. 32 weeks, I repeated. Saying it out loud helped translate it from numbers to reality. 32 weeks ago, I wasn't on our couch. I was shouldering into plate carrier and dust, radio crackling. The world narrowed to grid coordinates and call signs. 32 weeks ago, I kissed my wife in a terminal by the baggage carousels and walked toward a plane. Dr. Ortega placed the wand back in its holder as carefully as if it were a grenade pin. His hand trembled once and then went still. His diplomas said 20 years in practice. Nothing about today had been routine for him either. He drew in a breath and asked the question he was legally bound to ask and ethically sickened by. "Sergeant Reed, were you present for conception?" Marina let out a laugh so thin I could see the floor through it. "What kind of question? Noah, what's going on? Is something wrong with our baby?" Our baby. The phrase used to widen my chest. Now something in me closed around it like a fist. "I'd like copies of the scans and measurements," I told the doctor. "Everything you're going to put in the report. And the ultrasound images on a disc if you can swing it." My nurse can prepare that," he said. Then without looking at Marina, he added in that same low tone, "You need an attorney before you need me again." We left without scheduling a follow-up. The drive home passed under the tires like a film with the sound off. San Antonio at 2 p.m. Tractors in the backs of pickups, heat rising off the asphalt, a hawk riding thermal over a billboard for a barbecue joint we'd always meant to try. Marina filled the quiet with words that slid around the truth like water around a rock. "Machines are wrong all the time," she said, hands twisting, nails French manicured. Maybe he typed in the wrong date. Or maybe he was looking at someone else's chart. Or maybe I'm just measuring big because you know how some women do. "Machines can be wrong," I agreed. "Arithmetic usually isn't." She stared at me then, searching for a soft place to land. When she didn't find one, she pressed her forehead to the window and watched our subdivision slide by. Cedar Grove, single-story stucco boxes, and mesquite trees that never stay where you plant them. We met 6 years ago in New Braunfels at a July river float some mutual friend swore would reset my soul. Parade of inflatable sharks and warm beer, sunburned shoulders, and laughter bouncing off the water. Marina had a laugh that cut through heat like shade. She worked front desk at a dental clinic then, said she liked mouths because they told on a person, the grinding, the neglect, the braces they couldn't wait to ditch. She liked uniforms because they meant you'd chosen something bigger than yourself. She liked that I didn't tell stories unless she asked. We did a courthouse wedding with her parents and 2 of my Marines who could spare the afternoon. No string quartet, no mason jars with fairy lights. A sheet cake in a church basement because her mother wanted to say a prayer over us. We rented a duplex on the west side until I could put down on our place in Cedar Grove. I spent my first deployment sending her videos of sunsets I knew I'd forget unless I recorded them. She spent it sending me boxes that smelled like our laundry and Sunday afternoons. This last time, she cried at the gate, chest against mine, noise and snot, and every goodbye we've ever said bundled into one. She promised, forehead to mine, I'll make time move faster. I'll be here when it's done. First month, she called 3 nights a week. Second month, the calls got shorter. By month 3, it was mostly texts. Yoga ran long, or friend asked me to help with her pop-up, or phone dead. Love you. I told myself that's how surviving spouses survive. I told myself to be grateful she had a life that didn't depend on my voice to prop it up. 2 weeks ago I came home. She clung like the airport goodbye had been reversed. She'd put on weight. Stress will lay that on a person like a blanket. She wore loose shirts. When we were together in bed, she moved like someone avoiding something. Not me, exactly, but an angle. Last week, she told me she'd taken a test. 10 weeks, she said, and cried like she'd won a prize. She'd wanted to surprise me when it felt real, she said. She'd wanted me in that room when we saw the baby for the first time, she said. I believed her because I wanted to. Now, in our kitchen that smelled like the vanilla candles she loved because they made even Tuesday feel like the holidays, I set a glass on the counter and said without turning, "When are you due?" She let out a short, panicked breath. The doctor didn't say exactly. He did, I answered. He just said it to me. She went very still. Out the window. Our neighbor was in his driveway with the hood up on an old Camaro he'd been trying to tame since last fall. Colt Ramirez, 40-something, divorced 2 years, foreman for a concrete outfit. The kind of man who knows how to rebuild a carburetor without making a mess. He'd helped move our patio set while I was away. Marina had mentioned him twice in calls and 5 or 6 times in texts. Colt helped me fix the gate. Colt took my trash cans in when it rained. Good neighbor stuff. Neighborly enough to smell like aftershave when he dropped by with a package the mail carrier shoved on our stoop. I finished my water and put the glass in the sink. How long have you been sleeping with Colt? The glass she'd been reaching for slid out of her fingers and shattered, and she stood there over the glittering pieces with both hands still shaped like they were holding something. What did you say? You heard me. Noah, that's insane, she said, and her voice pitched up at the end like the word wasn't sure it belonged to her. He's a neighbor. He helped with a few projects. You were gone. Why would you even? Because numbers, I said. Because 3 minus 8 isn't 10. This isn't a patrol report, she snapped, something hot and ugly lighting behind her eyes. You don't get to interrogate me like I'm some village chief. In Afghanistan, I said, keeping my voice level. The person lying is likely trying to kill you. Here, they're just trying to rewrite your life. She sank into a chair like her legs had discovered gravity. Tears came. Real, messy, the kind of crying that makes your face puffy and your words thick. I love you, she said into her palms. Whatever you think happened, I love you. We can figure this out. Please. I'm going to pack a bag, I said. I'll be in touch through counsel. Counsel? She lowered her hands. Noah, don't do this. Don't. The baby has a father, I said. It just isn't me. I paid cash for a week at a courtyard motel near the training annex, the kind with the humming wall AC and the faint smell of disinfectant you can't scrub out of paint. I've slept worse places. At 0700, I called someone I trusted who knew how to turn chaos into paperwork. Gunnery Sergeant Reed, said a voice that had lived both in uniform and out. It's Ava Mendoza. We'd used her when we bought the house. Before her private practice, she'd spent a decade as Army JAG. She spoke fluent military and fluent judge. I told her about Dr. Ortega, about week 32, about the way Marina looked everywhere but at me. She didn't fill my silence with sympathy. We're going to do 3 things, she said. Establish non-paternity, document the timeline, and get you ahead of the divorce. I'll file today for an emergency order compelling a DNA test once the baby's born. In the meantime, start a log. Screenshots, receipts, phone records, any charges that don't make sense. If marital funds supported an affair, we get them back. I don't have proof it's Colt. You don't need his name today, she said. You need dates. I'd never been the kind of spouse who checks another person's pockets. That morning, I became one. Not because I wanted to know, but because I needed to. The home office still smelled slightly like toner and last year's tax season. Marina kept binder tabs and cute labels on everything, a place for each paper, a pretty little title on each file. It made the search easier and harder at the same time. There were receipts from places I hadn't seen. Dinner for two at a bistro on the Riverwalk. I only know because guys take their girlfriends there when they want to pretend San Antonio is Paris. A Saturday night room at the Palmetto Suites downtown, furnished beautifully to look like you live in a magazine. Menswear from a shop that sells to foremen who've got cord in the morning. Phone records, which are dull until they aren't. Hundreds of minutes to a number I didn't recognize, starting about 4 weeks into my deployment. A card from a women's clinic in Alamo Heights, dated 7 months back. Prenatal sample, scrawled in tired nurse handwriting. Start vitamins. I photographed everything. If the core taught me anything, it's that your memory will lie to you when you're tired. Paper won't. Marina came home while I was closing the filing drawer. She stopped in the doorway like she'd walked into a room she didn't belong in. You said you were staying somewhere else, she said. I am. Her gaze flicked from the desk to my phone and back. Did you go through my things? I went through our things, I answered. Whatever you think you saw. Alamo Heights, I said. 7 months ago. She put a hand to her stomach like she could hide the proof by touching it. Her mouth worked for a moment before a sound came out. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I took a test, and I thought I should make sure I was expecting, I supplied. You were expecting. She sank onto the edge of the chair, and for the first time she didn't reach for a story. I'm sorry, she said. It wasn't supposed to, she swallowed. It started a little bit after you left. It was just one time, and then, one time, I repeated, and held up 2 fingers. Once a week for 7 months looks very much like more than one time. I didn't mean, I never planned on. She pressed both hands to her eyes and breathed like she'd been running. I took that breathing, and the office, and the lemon cleaner smell of our kitchen, and folded them all into a manila envelope with Ava's name on it. The next day, a process server put a packet in Marina's hand at the clinic where she worked. 2 hours later, my phone lit with her name 6 times in a row. I let each one die, then sent a message that said, all communication through counsel. At 1600, she was waiting in the driveway when I came by to grab a toolbox and a duffel I forgot. She had made enchiladas, my favorite, with the homemade sauce she uses on holidays. She'd set the table like a magazine spread and turned the stereo low. Stay, she said. We can fix this. We can be us again. We can. There's no us, I said, and meant it like a map. Not anger. Direction. You made another person instead. Do you want me to get on my knees? She said, and her face crumpled in the asking. Because I will. I will do whatever. No, I said. What I want is a life where I don't have to double-check the math. Sometimes the worst part of being a Marine is how calm you can be while everything you love goes out with the trash. I've spent enough afternoons in courtrooms to know they all smell the same. Paper, old coffee, too strong perfume. Judge Evelyn Romero had eyes that could fold a liar in half, and a voice more tired than unkind. Marina sat at the defendant's table with a lawyer young enough to still believe he could talk a judge into unseeing facts. Ava put our timeline on the bench like a series of waypoints. We're not here to punish anyone for falling in love with the wrong person, Ava told the judge at the outset. We're here because the defendant misused community assets to conduct an extended affair while her spouse was deployed, attempted to impose a false paternity, and erased the plaintiff's informed consent for the single, most consequential relationship of his life. The facts are not contested. The dates are not ambiguous. We're asking the court to draw the line the law provides. The DNA order came automatically once the baby was born. The result arrived by courier in a stiff envelope that weighed more than it should have. Probability of paternity, 0%. Those numbers made me feel both like I was drowning and like someone had put a plank under my feet. Marina's lawyer argued that who slept with who shouldn't affect who gets the house or the savings account. Judge Romero let him talk himself into quiet. This court doesn't deal in feelings, she said at last. We deal in facts. The facts show that Mrs. Reed diverted community funds to facilitate a relationship outside the marriage over a period of months, and that she undertook to conceal the true parentage of her child. That has consequences. Her gavel wasn't loud when it fell. It didn't need to be. 65% of the community estate to Mr. Reed, including the residents. Reimbursement to him for expenditures related to the affair. Any and all pregnancy-related expenses the sole responsibility of the child's mother. Paternity adjudicated as to Mr. Reed as non-father. Marina stared at her hands while the orders were read. No outburst. No theatrics. Just a woman sitting under the weight she'd carried into the room. She caught me at the elevator afterward. "Noah," she said. "Please." I turned because I owed her that much. Her belly was a smooth arc under a dress that tried to make her look like she felt like she looked. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time the words were bare. "No embroidery. That doesn't fix a damn thing, but I am. Sorry is the right size for the thing you do when you dent someone's bumper," I said. This was bigger. She nodded once, and then again like she was agreeing with a preacher in church. "I'm moving," she said. "Mom says I can, until I figure things out." "Be well," I said, and the doors slid between us. 2 months later, my neighbor's Camaro disappeared from his driveway. 2 days after that, so did the furniture. In the trades around here, news carries fast. A foreman who messes with a Marine's marriage becomes a man no company wants on a site. I didn't lay a hand on him, but I didn't have to. His ex learned what he'd done in the middle of custody renegotiations and took a bigger bite of his paycheck than he'd planned on surrendering. He left for the other side of the state, where his last name and ours didn't turn heads at gas stations. I kept the house as long as it took to walk into the kitchen and not see the version of myself who would have raised another man's child. 6 months. I sold it to a staff sergeant and his wife, who came with 3 children and a dog that looked too big for indoor living. They walked into the place and made noise in it in a way that sounded like the house exhaled. I bought a smaller place near the training grounds, a shotgun floor plan, and a backyard that backs up to a strip of greenbelt where deer look like ghosts in the morning. Ava sent me the last disbursement from the accounts with a sticky note that said, "Go buy something stupid and loud." I bought a used bass boat instead and took it to the lake at sunrise on Saturdays because there's a kind of quiet that only lives on water. People tell you betrayal is a fire. It isn't. It's ice. It's the slow numbness that takes over your hand when you've gripped something too long and too hard and didn't notice you were losing blood. It's standing in a kitchen that smells like vanilla and realizing the life you loved is a story told by someone who left out the middle. I didn't date. Not because I'd become a monk, but because I had to teach my pulse how to stop reading faces for lies. I spent time with the guys who don't need you to say anything to know how your week was. I taught a class on logistics to a bunch of E3s who thought planning meant charging your phone the night before. I rebuilt the engine on a 96 Bronco I dragged out of a friend's yard because broken things either teach you how to fix them or teach you how to walk away. 3 months after the decree, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, a stamped envelope with my name and handwriting I knew better than my own. Marina didn't ask for anything in it. She didn't offer explanations. She wrote 1 page about the baby, a boy, how he'd come into the world angry and hungry like he'd been waiting too long. She wrote his hair was as black as mine, and then crossed the sentence out so that it was still there, but with a line through it. Below that, 1 sentence I didn't expect. "I thought I could make my choices and then push the consequences onto you," she wrote. "I am so ashamed. No manipulation. No argument." I folded the page and slid it into the back of a cookbook that belonged to my grandmother, under a recipe for cornbread that uses bacon grease because it's the right thing to use, not because it's the healthy choice. When fall finally loosened the heat's chokehold, a buddy invited me to a volunteer day gutting a hurricane-damaged community center 2 towns over. The building smelled like wet gypsum and mildew. We wore masks and youth group t-shirts, and by lunch I was covered from eyelashes to boots in powder and sweat. A woman about my age worked the opposite wall with a pry bar like she'd been born with one in her hand. Her hair was tucked under a bandana, and she laughed at herself when her bar slipped and she landed on her butt. "Nice descent," I said, offering a hand up. "You should see my dismount," she said, and her eyes smiled before her mouth did. "Tessa," she added, wiping her palm on her jeans before she shook. "I teach math over at the high school. Kids hate me and thank me in the same sentence. Keeps me humble." "Noah," I said. "Logistics. Marines. Children think I'm yelling when I'm just talking loud." She grinned. "I'm good at fractions. You probably already did the math on that." We pulled drywall until our shoulders hurt and then traded stories about stupid paperwork and good coffee. She didn't ask about my ring. I didn't volunteer. There was room in our conversation for the parts of our lives we didn't tell strangers. We met again the next weekend because the building still had too many walls, And because bringing donuts gives a man an excuse to see if the thing he imagined the first time was a trick of dust. It wasn't. There are people you date because the world told you to. There are people you spend a Saturday with, and then realize halfway through a sandwich that your shoulders have dropped and your voice is quiet because you don't have to fill the space with anything. Months later, when the oak leaves turned the color of bread crust and the air started pretending it might be cold soon, I told her about the ultrasound room and the sentence that opened this story. She didn't make the sound people make when they're trying to express disgust on your behalf. She didn't tell me all men are dogs or all women are snakes. She listened, leaning forward, elbows on her knees, like she was learning a new song. When I finished, she said only, "That must have been so lonely." It was the right word. It was also the first time I realized I wasn't anymore. Marina texted once more a year later. A photo, nothing else. A toddler sitting in a plastic wagon, cheeks like apples, hair as dark as mine and eyes as dark as his unknown father's. He looked like a person who'd be good at running and at getting away with things because of his smile. I stared until my eyes burned, then put my phone down and went outside to tighten the line on a tarp I'd left too loose over the Bronco because a storm was coming. Some things you fix, some things you brace for, some things you let pass and are better for what they wash away. People use the word revenge like it means fire and spectacle, like it means ripping someone's life at the seams so it mirrors the way they ripped yours. I won't pretend I didn't imagine, in those first days, knocking on Colt's door and solving the problem the way the worst parts of me wanted to. But the truth is, the sharpest blade wasn't my fists. It was the refusal to carry a lie to term. It was the steady work of paperwork and math and clean lines drawn by someone in robes who's seen every kind of mess a heart can make. It was knowing the house I sleep in is one I don't have to check for ghosts. It was learning to sit on a lake with the motor off and the world finally quiet, and the weight in my chest not a weight anymore. If you asked me what I learned, I'd say this. War teaches a man to read terrain. Coming home, I learned to read silence. I learned that arithmetic is unkind and merciful at the same time. I learned that you don't have to smash someone's life to ruin them. You can step out of the story they wrote for you, and they'll be left holding the script with no one to perform it. And I learned that the truest kind of getting even isn't doing harm. It's building a life so honest that their lie has nowhere to live. The baby, by the way, is fine. The doctor was right about that. What he saw on the screen that day destroyed something, but not the child. He'll grow and run and throw rocks at fences because he's a boy in Texas and boys do that. He'll learn one day why his last name isn't mine. He'll learn what truth costs and why it's worth it. And maybe, when he's tall, he'll meet a man in line at a hardware store who looks a little like him around the eyes and doesn't look away. Maybe they'll nod at each other like two people who both learned the same math a hard way. People like to end stories like this with triumph. The "I won," the "they lost," the neat ledger balanced. The truth is messier and better. I lost something. They did too. Then I found something that didn't need apologizing for. If there's any revenge in that, it isn't the kind that burns. It's the kind that lights a porch and keeps burning when it's late and the home you built is yours.